This portion of This Morning sponsored by Schlotzsky's Deli. Schlotzsky's, funny name, serious sandwich.
It is 21 before the hour. For 2 centuries, George Washington has been known as the father of his country. But was he also the father of a man named West Ford, who was born to a slave on a plantation not far from Washington's? West Ford's descendants say he was, and that they've kept it a family secret all these years. Now they're going public with their claim and seeking a DNA test to back it up. Linda Bryant and Janet Allen are descendants of West Ford. They join us this morning along with historian Richard Brookhiser, who wrote a biography of Washington called Founding Father. Good morning to all 3 of you.
Good morning.
Linda, let's start with you. You've kept this has been in your family, this secret, for generations. Why are you talking about it now?
Well, basically, bringing our story public is more of a ritual of pride to the Ford descendants as instead of a bid for public acceptance about his alleged paternity. West Ford has been in literature since 1850, and so it really has been public knowledge for quite some time. Do you agree, Janet?
Yes, I agree.
Did what went on in the last year or so with Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, did that have anything to do with this coming public now?
We came out 2 years before that.
In 1996.
Yeah, and we've been trying to get it out in our family for a long time. My mother couldn't get it out in her time because of the civil rights era, lynching and pot shots that were taken at the family. So we kept it quiet until we recently came out.
There was something in your family secret that what you thought you would never tell to a white person. Tell me about that.
Well, basically, you have to understand, West Ford was born during the days of slavery. He was a slave. He was a white slave. He was fair-skinned. He had blue-gray eyes and red hair. And you got to imagine him living as a white slave on the Bushfield plantation. And from the time of his birth, he was told that even though his skin was white, that the Washington family would never claim him as a Washington, and that the only people that he could tell of his heritage were his children and his grandchildren. And so the story was handed down very carefully for over 200 years from the patriarchs to the and matriarchs of the family, and that is how the story was handed down.
Let's go down to the George Washington historian. Richard, what do you make of all of this?
Well, you have to look at oral tradition just like documents, letters, diaries. They're always interesting. You always learn something from them, but you may not learn what they claim to be telling you. I think there is a Washington connection with West Ford. I think it's more likely that his father was George Washington's nephew, Bushrod, who was an important man. He was an associate justice of the Supreme Court.
What got you going in that direction? Why that Washington?
Well, the two difficulties that the story has are there's a likelihood that George Washington was sterile. He and Martha were married in their late 20s. They never had any children. Martha was a widow when they married, and in her first marriage she had 4 children in 7 years. So that sets up a possibility. It's also not certain that Washington met Venus, West Ford's mother. They lived on different plantations. They were about a day and a half apart, and this was at a very busy time in Washington's life when he was winding up the Revolutionary War and being constantly besieged by visitors of Mount Vernon.
What's the strongest reason that you believe that George Washington did not father Mr. Ford? Is it the two that you just mentioned, or is there a stronger one?
There's a psychological one, I think, which was that Washington's opinions on slavery were beginning to change at this time. West Ford was born in the early to mid-1780s. During the war, Washington had commanded free black soldiers. After the war, he said that he would never again sell slaves like cattle at a market, and he didn't. He was beginning to see that slavery was wrong, and then at the end of his life in 1799, he signs his will and he frees all his slaves. He's the only slave-owning president to do that. So it just seems that a relationship, an exploitative relationship of this kind, might not fit with that development.
Your chance to rebuttal.
Answer? Thank you very much. First of all, West Ford has been connotated being Bushrod, Washington being his father, but we would like to say that there are no Bushrods or Corbins names in our Ford family tree of names. And Venus herself handed down that the old General George Washington was the father of Wes Ford. As far as George Washington traveling back and forth to the Mount Vernon, to the Bushfield plantation, he was an expert horseman. It was only a 1 to 2 day ride, and there were 3 times in the year 1784 that he could have been able to be with Venus.
Well, we only have about 30 seconds left. What happens next?
What we're trying to do now is to do DNA testing. Unfortunately, the Mount Vernon's Ladies Association has misplaced Wes Ford's body, and so it's going to be very difficult for us to do DNA.
All right.
Hopefully Eugene Foster will be able to help us.
We'll have to leave it there. Linda Bryant, Janet Allen, Richard Brookhiser, thank you all three for being with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It is 16 before the hour. Next, got more than one baby on the way. We've got what you need when CBS This Morning continues.